All right, so we should get started. So we've all got our prayer book, so we should do our prayers. So, so if you don't mind tonight, just to get started, I'll do the prayers. We'll just do, oh, and there is Curtis. Hi, Curtis. How are you? Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Hi, Curtis.
Hi, Curtis.
Hi, Curtis. Happy New Year.
Okay.
Hi,
All right.
Curtis.
Okay, so we'll do the prayers. We'll do twice in English, once in Tibet to get into the groove again. Okay, so you can recite along with me while your microphones are off. Will be good. So we start on page 1, the altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dangwa je pe dra no pa je pe ge. Tarpa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dog now dang drel nur du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe zhang ju brin po she to par ja. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wala ko. Ma she ba du lu na gi sam ge wala ko. Tu de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Dren san sa wa dangur pa je pe pao den la ma dam pa nam la kab su chi o. Ye dam kil gorgi la sok nam la kab su chi o. Sangye chom den de nam la kab su chi o. Dam pe cho nam la kab su chi o. Ape ge dun nam la kab su chi o. Awo ka jo cho kyong song me song yes she gi chang dang dem pa nam la kab su chi o. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Shangju Ningpo Chi Ba Sangye Namla Kapsu Chi Chodang Shangshu Sampayi Soklang Deshen Kapsu Chi Jitar Nongi Deshegi Shangshu Tugni Ki Padang Shangshu Sampe La Pala Te Dagrim Shen E Pata Te Shen Jola Pandandu Shangshu Samni Ki Gishing Te Shen Du Ni La Pala Rimpa Shindu La Pa Ji O. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chodam La Shangshu Badu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Ki Pe Sonamgi Drola Penshir Sangye Jupa Sho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she de wadang de we gurdang dem par jorchi. Dug now dang do now gi gu dang tra war jorchi. Dug now me pe de wadang mi dra war jorchi. Nei ring jak dang ni dang dra wei tang nam la nei pa jorchi. Now turn to page 12 in the prayer book, the Sagarmati requested sutra. We'll do in English one time. Likewise be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are within me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food, and drink peacefully. Enjoy it and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the maras be purified. As a result, may all the maras be defeated. Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum. Okay, thank you. So thank you all again for everybody for joining again this cycle of teachings, and we're going to continue with learning Buddhism. We're going to go start at the beginning and go through the entire book. And so, as you may know, the book's no longer in print, and we don't have any copies, but I have made the PDF of each chapter to you. So these were the PDFs that were made available to the printer that subsequently became the book. So you're not missing anything by these PDFs at all. So, so if you can read ahead is great, or if you read as we're going along, we're not going to go line by line, word by word, but it is going to follow the sequence of each chapter, and you can read it later, like I said, and you can make notes. So I encourage that, and because this is really good stuff. This is based on the Jewel Ornamental Liberation, which my book. It's around here somewhere. The Jewel Ornamental Liberation is the stages of the path that we have been talking about in Buddhism 102 that we talk about on Saturday nights. And so this book is based on that. This is a more conversational prose type, whereas Jewel Ornamental Liberation is much more like a college text. So, so this book was written by Khenpo Samdup, who is the spiritual director of Drikung Dharma Surya Center in Fairfax, Virginia, as well as he is spiritual director of three other centers and a few other Dharma talk places. And he was chosen to be a teacher by His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche when Khenpo was a child. And he was raised in the monastery and was his teachings were overseen by Garchen Rinpoche. And so Khenpo is a young man. He's in his mid-40s, and he will continue on being a great teacher for many, many, many years to come, in the next generations and 2 or 3 generations. So it's wonderful to have him in our midst, and so on. And I encourage everybody to join his teachings that he has. So if you need some information about how to join him on his Zoom teachings, I will be glad to give you that information. So if you have any questions during our talk, don't hesitate to turn on your microphone and speak right up. I don't mind being interrupted, and we can, integrate your conversation into what we're talking about and so on. If it's something that needs immediate attention, we'll talk about it. If it's something that can be, talked about a little bit later, we might do that too. But we will seriously talk about everything that you bring up. So if anybody has any questions now, anything you want to bring up right now, go right ahead. I just want to welcome Ed Jones. I understand that Ed is a friend of Michael's, so welcome Ed to our humble midst here, and we hope that you find it interesting. And as I just said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to open up your microphone. So this first chapter is the entrance to Buddhism, which is refuge. So we need to understand what this means. So in trying to understand this, we need to understand the 3 jewels, what we consider to be the 3 jewels in Buddhism. So the 3 jewels in Buddhism is, number 1, is the mind of the Buddha. What is the mind of the Buddha? And is the Buddha something different than we are? Well, the Buddha taught that we are all Buddha, that all human beings, all sentient beings have Buddha nature within them. Now, it's not recognized by most beings. So a human being of all the sentient beings has the ability to be able to recognize that Buddha nature. So in order to be able to do that, the Buddha taught how he discovered his Buddha nature. And that teaching is called the Dharma. That's the Dharma path that the Buddha had taught. And then more and more people began to bring this teaching into their lives, and it became an integral part of their lives, and they became the community of these Buddhists, of these people who were working on being able to purify themselves and recognize this Buddha nature that they have within themselves, and they're referred to as the Sangha. The Sangha is the community of people. So there's the mind of the Buddha, which is the first jewel. The second is the jewel of the Dharma, which is the intellectualization, which is the speech of the Buddha. And the third is the body of the Buddha, is the community of people that become this Buddha family, this Buddha community, if you will. So these are referred to as the three jewels. So first, let me just back up just 1 second and say that the Buddha lived 2,600 years ago, was a human being just like us, who think the conditions were right, his karma was right for him to be able to recognize this true nature that he had within himself. His name as a human being was Siddhartha Gautama. And maybe you've read one thing or another about Siddhartha Gautama, or you've heard the name before. And, you know, Hermann Hesse wrote a great book called Siddhartha, which is not directly about Siddhartha Gautama, about the Buddha, although he does reference him in the book. And the main character of the book, Siddhartha, meets the Buddha. So, so I'm just differentiating that for you. And so Siddhartha Gautama, after he attained enlightenment, he was then recognized to be the Buddha who was being prophesied in the traditions of India at that time. It came out of the Hindu tradition, and the Hindu tradition talks about the prophecy of the Buddha coming from Brahma and Shakti, from the main two deities in the Hindu tradition. So they recognize him. So many people recognize him as this fulfilled prophecy as the Buddha. And the Buddha is a Sanskrit word that literally means the awakened one. But it also has connotation that it means teacher. It also has connotation that it means all knowing. It also has connotation to mean free mind or peace of mind. And Buddha Shakyamuni, now he was called Shakyamuni. Shakya was the family name that he came from, the Shakya kingdom, that his father was a king. And so he was a Shakya, and Shakyamuni, Muni means sage. So he was sage of the Sakya family. So that's how we get to identify this Buddha, this historical Buddha, as the Buddha Shakyamuni, the sage of the Sakya family. So there's been many, 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 many Buddhas before Buddha Shakyamuni, many Buddhas during the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, and many more Buddhas after the time of Buddha Shakyamuni. So, and the Buddha Shakyamuni taught that we all have this true nature within ourselves, regardless of who we are, no matter whether we're male or female, whether we're young or we're old, whether we're rich or we're poor. This is our true nature. And this true nature is confused, is blocked up with emotions, is what blocked up with false mental obscurations, mental blockages, and so on, false view of what wisdom is, of what this reality is, and so on. And it's very busy. It keeps us occupied. And the mind of the Buddha is very, very, very quiet, is very still, is peace of mind. And for us to be able to recognize that, we have to be able to tame our mind. We have to be able to learn how to rest our physical body, rest our intellectual body, to recognize our spiritual body, that we have these three bodies. So these are very important things that we keep coming back to, that we keep referring to, because this is a process that for many of us, we've not heard these things before, or maybe we've had some inkling about these things. Maybe we've read about these things, or maybe we've had some insight of ourselves of doing this. But this monkey mind that we have that keeps jumping from one thought to another, that the ego is constantly grabbing onto things to give ourselves unique identity. And the ego wants to be unique. Buddhism wants to be selfless. Buddhism wants to be just peaceful and seeing that we're all connected, that we're all the same. So these are very important things. So what we're learning to do is how to rest our physical body, how to rest our intellectual mind, and then we use the energy from both of those bodies to open up our spiritual body, which is in the heart center of our body. And then we all do that individually, but it's all the same process. Saying this now, this is not unique to Buddhism. There's many different paths to recognizing this true nature. This is not the only way, in other words. There's many other traditions. You know, there's the Hebrew tradition, there's the Christianity tradition, there's the Hindu tradition, there's the Islamic tradition, there are the traditions of Asia, all the many different philosophies that came out of China and Southeast India and Southeast Asia and so on. So there's many different traditions. And the essence of all of them is all speaking about the same thing, this true nature. But what differentiates them is the cultures and so on, and the way that the people, human beings, have used this as a means to be able to create a self-aggrandizement for themselves and for their followers, to say, oh, this is unique and we are the only ones and the other ones are wrong and so on. This is the only way. The Buddha doesn't say that. The Buddha didn't teach that. And then as we begin to have glimpses of this ourselves, we begin to recognize this ourselves, that we are all brothers and sisters equally. It doesn't mean that we can't practice specific religions if we choose to do that. If we choose not to do that, that's okay too. But what this is a philosophy. Buddhism is a philosophy of being able to be able to recognize this true nature, a philosophy of the self, to be able to recognize that it's ourself that we are attaching to, that we are grasping, that we are clinging on to. And as long as we keep grasping that unique identity, we are defeating our ability to be able to recognize our true nature, that we call this Buddha nature, this Buddha mind, this peace of mind that we have within ourselves. So the teaching of the Dharma, the second of the three jewels, is this teaching about how to do that, what the sequences are, what the things that we face in being able to do that. And then what we use to be able to overcome those blockages, those attachments that we have, the aversions that we have, that we cling on to, that we think give us our unique identity. So what we're trying to do is just become completely free of any egotistical attachments and aversions, and see ourselves as brothers and sisters equally. So we'll talk about these things many, many times as we progress along, talking about learning Buddhism. So in the book, it's described here that the first object of refuge is the mind of the Buddha, like I just said, and that so in Sanskrit, it is the awakened one. Buddha means awakened one. In Tibetan, and we fall back on Tibetan because we are what we the tradition that we are part of is a Tibetan tradition, and it is a wisdom tradition that is that focuses on the wisdom of becoming the Buddha, of recognizing this Buddha within ourselves and being able to perfect that. So Tibetan Buddhism is especially tuned to that. And we'll, as we go along, we'll talk about the different parts of Buddhism that are also part of this Tibetan Buddhism. So, but in the Tibetan language, Buddha means Sangye, Sangye. So it's two words, and Sang means purified, and Ge means fully developed. So it means fully developed purification. Sangye, Buddha, the awakened one. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what the Buddha is this within ourselves. So whenever we say the word Buddha, we're not talking about some being who is outside of us, someone who is in some kind of a heaven, or someone who has some control over us or something like that. It's not like that at all. We are Buddha in our purest essence. We are Buddha. And what we are trying to do is to recognize that by recognizing that which is blocking us from recognizing that. So what is blocking us is our human nature. Our human nature is blocking our Buddha nature. Our human nature is full of all these different obscurations, all these different emotions, all these different wrong views of things that we use to create this identity for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for our nations, for worldly activities, the way that we see them, the way that we justify them, and so on. So we have to recognize that. We have to see that and see how we've fabricated all this, that all this is contrived out of ego, and that we have to be able to cut through this ego. So we need to identify what the causes of this is first, and then see what the results are because of these things. And then we're able to change those results into being purified, into being more simple, being more quiet, being more free, to this mind of the Buddha. So we have the afflictive emotions. The afflictive emotions are all these myriad different ways in which we go through life thinking about things and using this to condition our actions, the things that we do, and so on. And it's said that during the time of the Buddha, he taught for 50 years after he became enlightened. He taught for 50 years, and he traveled around all around northern India 2,600 years ago. And during that time, it's said that he encountered 84,000 emotions. So you can imagine what that might mean, that maybe he encountered all these different people going around to all these different villages and so on, and people coming to him and telling him their problems and saying, oh, Buddha, I've got this problem, I got that problem. Can you help me with this? Help me with that. And he recognized, he saw all these 84,000 emotions because everyone was a little bit different. But the one thing that he found that he could do was that all these 84,000 emotions had 5 basic things that were in common with those 84,000 emotions. So the first one was just a general ignorance of not realizing who they are, not realizing their true nature, the Buddha nature. They were ignorant of that they had attachments, they had desires, and through trying to fulfill these unquenchable desires, they were just moving around all the time trying to pull things in, thinking that this is who I am. That they begin to identify with their body, they begin to identify with all the things they have around them, their families or their possessions and all these things. So it's kind of like having a ring in your nose, being led around by these desires. And then the next thing was hatred. The people were identifying with hatred, with aggression, with anger. And this hatred, this anger, this aggression was taking people in directions that they thought that they had to go, that they had fear, that they were going to lose their achievements, their attainments, their possessions, and so on. So in order to protect those, they would have these aggressions, they would have these angers and so on with different people saying, oh, you're robbing me of my identity. Oh, you're robbing me of my possessions. Oh, you're robbing me of my family and so on. And therefore, I have an aversion to you. So whether it was concepts that they had aversion to, or it was people that they had aversions to, but this was one of the 3 main things that developed into these 84,000 emotions. So the first was ignorance, the second was desire, and the third was hatred. Then the fourth one is jealousy or envy, and how much people were being led astray by their jealousies, because the jealousies tend to immobilize ourselves. We become like handcuffed in thinking that we're not good enough to be able to attain that which we would like to attain. Now, there are many things that we would like to attain that we don't need to attain, but nevertheless, we get immobilized, we get paralyzed and thinking that we can't do those things. If we start doing those things and realize, oh, this is something I really didn't want anyway, then we need to be able to let that go and to release that. But this jealousy, you see, this envy just feeds back in the back of our minds and becomes a paralysis to our being able to do the things that are really wholesome, that are really good for us. So that was number 4. And then number 5 is greed or pridefulness. Greed and pridefulness, being able to take more than we need, to be able to hoard, to be able to not want to share. So maybe it's possessions, money, maybe it's family, maybe it's, my family's better than your family and so on. And then what comes out of this is a pridefulness. Oh, I have all this. I've been able to acquire all of this, and I'm not willing to share it with you because you're not worthy as we are, because we're better than you are, or I'm better than you are. So whether it's my possessions or whether it's my accomplishments, whether it's my intellectual accomplishments, my skills, my talents, whatever it is, I'm prideful and I'm not willing to share them. I realize that I can do things that you can't do, but I'm not going to tell you how to do these things, even though they will make your life better for you and your family and so on. So we develop this pridefulness. So these 5 things are the basis of these 84,000 emotions. So this is a huge realization. This is a huge understanding. This is a huge responsibility to be able to bring into ourselves, to be able to now analyze our lives and be able to purify those entanglements that we create, these webs that we weave, the story that we weave, that we begin to believe who we are in this fictitious mode of self-aggrandizement, of self-identity, of the self, and not the Buddha, not being the Buddha, the free mind, the liberated mind. So these emotions paralyze us. And then another thing that blocks us is our just unawareness, our cognizance of what is around us is very limited. We think that all this is real. We don't see the temporary nature of all this. We won't accept our temporary nature. And that we begin to use that and rationalize that as how important I am now and how this moment is the most important moment and so on like that. So it's a little more subtle than the emotions. We're going to talk a lot about that. But nevertheless, the cognizance of our awareness or our unawareness is limiting factors why we don't recognize our Buddha nature. So then we have to recognize in talking about this, we need to recognize there is the self and then there is the other. You know, we look at our body and we see that, but then in the midst of all this other multiplicity of stuff, of all this phenomenal nature, we need to be able to come to terms with that. What does that mean? And the rationalizations that we make prevent us from being able to do that because we get caught up in these stories that we tell ourselves and that we buy into, that we learn from our families, we learn from our friends, we learn from our schools, we learn from society and so on, and that we've just gotten further and further and further and further away from the essence of this true nature of being free. So you see this theme of freedom is very important. We all want to be free. This is something that all beings want to be, especially human beings. We all want to be free, but we're always doing things to enslave ourselves to our thoughts, to our attachments, to our ignorance, all these things. We're creating our own problems by not realizing that we're already free and we just have to be able to simplify our lives and not need all these other things. So this is talking about the mind now, because this is all the mind's perception of what's all going on. So this is the Buddha mind. So this is what we need to recognize. So what we're trying to explain here now, let me put this into the context of refuge, because we're taking refuge in this three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, the mind, the speech, and the body. We have this wisdom within ourselves. We have this Buddha nature within ourselves. We're taking refuge in that deepest essence of ourselves. So what this Buddha is doing is giving us permission and giving us a means by which we can do that through the teachings. And then the community of brothers and sisters who are here to support us. And then we become part of that community supporting others. So we see this as being very dynamic. The mind of the Buddha, the speech of the Buddha, the intellectualization of the Buddha, and the body of the Buddha. So when we talk about the mind, let's be clear, when we talk about the mind, we're talking about there is this intellectual mind that is the brain, all these thoughts, all these memories, all these skills that we learn and so on that are temporary. This is the temporary mind. This is the little mind. When we die, all that is gone, isn't it? When the body stops, all that goes. All memory is gone. But there is this big mind, this true mind that we say is in the heart center of our body. It's not the heart. It's not the fleshy heart, but it's in the heart center. Like the heart is that which keeps us alive and so on, pumping, pumping, pumping and so on. But we have this mind heart that is this true nature that speaks its own language, that we all know that language, but we have to quiet down all this other noise to be able to hear that language, to be able to recognize that. So we're taking refuge in this. We're saying, yes, this is there. And yes, there is a way to be able to get to this. And yes, there are many different traditions that talk about this. Like I said, there's the Hebrew, there's the Christianity, there's the Hindu, there's the Islamic, there's the Chinese. There's many different ways to get to this. There's the Buddhism. The thing about the Buddhism that is very good is it's very articulate, and it removes all the mysteries. What the Buddhism is really trying to do is to keep to the essence. And when you hear the teachings, you're hearing the teachings in their purest, purest, purest form, with no embellishment by the teachers and so on. So this is very important, because you want to be able to get the authentic understanding of what this is. You don't want it being stepped on by somebody's ego and so on. So we take refuge in this. Say, yes, this is true. And we take refuge in our brothers and sisters. That, yes, there is a group of people that I can trust, that will trust me, and that we grow together. And when I make mistakes, they will forgive me. When they make mistakes, I will forgive them. But we'll grow together. It's like it's a Dharma family. We have our blood family, and we make many how do you say, forgivenesses for them, for their shortcomings, for our mothers and fathers, and for our brothers and sisters. We've been doing that for many years and so on. But now we're looking at that. Now we have this Dharma family, which is a spiritual family, and so it could be blood brothers and sisters, but it may not be. But we recognize that there is something else going on besides just the genetic lineage that we're part of. There is something else that is going. There is this spiritual lineage that we are part of. So we take refuge in that. So it doesn't mean that we exclude other things, but it does mean that there is a priority in place. We do say, okay, it's really smart to be able to bring our process together, that this is a process, and being able to learn about these things, to be able to contemplate these things, then to be able to integrate these things into our life as a practice. That we develop these things, we cultivate these things, and then we find that we begin to go through the changes where we begin to get that freedom of this Buddha mind. And to do that requires a commitment. So it's not required. You're not going to go to hell if you don't. Just because you didn't make this commitment or you broke this commitment, it's not that kind of hell. But the point is that this is a commitment that you make to yourself in this refuge, to say, okay, I'm going to give this a fair and honest opportunity to enhance my life, to recognize myself now in this greater point of view than maybe I had before. So, and by doing that, I take refuge in that. That during the course of this period of time, and maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 5 years, whatever it is, maybe there's no time element involved in it, but you're being able to look at things when things get confused and you're not sure what you're doing. You don't go to your neighbor and say, oh, how do I settle this? Or you don't go to somebody else that knows nothing about Buddhism to be able to explain to you what your confusion is about Buddhism, that you're going to keep it intact. You're going to go to brothers and sisters who are Buddhist brothers and sisters, who are Dharma brothers and sisters, just to be able to keep your mindfulness in check. I hope this makes some sense to you. I'm trying to make the point that it's not so rigid that if you don't do these things, catastrophic things are going to come to you and lightning is going to strike you where you sit. It's not like that. Right. It's not like that at all. But it's there as loving kindness. It's there as wisdom. It's there as compassion. It's there as joy. It's there as equanimity, that we're all the same. So this is a very important part of the conversation that we're going to continue to have about these 4 things: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So these become our brothers and sisters who really are working on that. This is what we take refuge in. So there can be a ceremony that's associated with this, but it's not something that we have to do. It is something that maybe we feel that if we do this, it's making an acknowledgement of my commitment to myself and to the people around me, but it's not necessary. So I just want to make these points to you. Any questions or comments? Everybody okay? Let me just get a little drink of water here, please. Okay. So what we've been talking about has been the mind of the Buddha. What is going on in there? What is going on there mostly is our human nature. What is behind that is our Buddha nature, which is very quiet, very still. That's what we want to get to. That's where the freedom is. In order to do that, we need to understand. We need to have an intellectualization of what this process is. So this is the second jewel. This is the Dharma. This is the speech of the Buddha. So this is the path indicated by the Buddha, and this is the most important part of the 3 jewels, because this is the thing that keeps us on track, is this intellectualization. When we're by ourselves and so on, and things begin to drift, we only have ourselves, and we need to have our mind, our little mind, be able to focus to get ourselves to the big mind, to make those 2 connect. So this is the path taught by the Buddha as the method to attain liberation from suffering and reach enlightenment. So all this confusion, all this emotions, all this mental misconceptions, you see, all manifest themselves as suffering to us. Oh, I'm so emotional. Oh, I'm suffering. Oh, this makes me upset. If I lose this, if I don't get that, if something happens, I get emotional, and it's suffering. If I don't understand and I'm confused, I'm suffering. So we don't dwell on the fact that we're that everything is suffering. It's not everything is suffering. When we understand the suffering and the causes of the suffering, what happens is we have happiness. So we need to get to true happiness to understand that. So to do that, we need to understand that which is keeping us from the happiness, which is suffering. So we need to understand it, but we're not dwelling on it to the point that we become some kind of, morose, I can't think of the word, sadistic or something like that, that we're causing all this, suffering for ourselves. We're trying to liberate ourselves from that suffering. So this is the method, how to do that. So it's a lot of work, so we do think about it quite a bit, but we're liberating. So to help us to do that, the first teaching of Sakyamuni Buddha, after he attained enlightenment, was to give the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are that all life has suffering in it. Doesn't matter who we are, no one is free from suffering. We all have suffering of all different types and so on. That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth is that the cause of this suffering is our desire. The cause of our suffering is ignorance. The cause of our suffering is greed, is hatred, is jealousy. It's the desire to have this life, this desire to have this body, this desire to have this stuff and everything. So we're causing our own suffering. So this is the second noble truth, that we are causing this ourselves. The third noble truth is the truth of cessation of suffering, the renunciation of all these things to the degree that they are making us suffering. We still need to have clothes. We still need to have a house. We still need to have a job. We still need to be part of society and so on. But we do it at a level that we're no longer so attached to it that if we that we have more than we need, and that it becomes our self-aggrandizement, that it becomes our ego identity and so on. So there has to be this balance. So we talk about it in terms of renouncing those things that are causing this hatred, causing this desire, so that we can live a life, but live a life as a Buddha. Live a life being free. Live a life that has peace of mind. And we can all do that. So this is a way that is showing us how to do it. It's not the only way, but this is the Buddha's way of doing this. So the truth of cessation, that there is a cessation, there is a renunciation. So then, how do we do that? That sounds very complicated. So the fourth noble truth is called the Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path is a way to be able to live our lives and to be able to have an evaluation, a set of mile markers, so to speak, that every mile has these, and there are questions that we ask and answer to ourselves. How true am I being to myself, to this true nature that I have? How much of this is helping me to undo my attachments of my ego, of my human nature, that is preventing me from being my peace of mind true nature, my Buddha nature? So this Eightfold Path is well articulated. And very quickly, we talk about it more later on, but very quickly now, is having the right view. And the right view is freedom. The right view is that we are all Buddha. The right view is that we all have enlightenment within ourselves. We all have that potential. We all have that ability. That's the right view. And we keep coming back to that when we get confused to say, oh, well, I'm blocking that up. I'm not free because I'm doing something that is keeping me from my freedom. If I want to be free, I need to remove all these obstacles and so on. So to help us to do that, we move to the next one, which is the right resolve, that I maintain the right perseverance, that I maintain the right effort, not effort, but the right protection to be able to do this for us. Whatever I have accomplished, whatever I've gained, whatever degree of freedom I have, that there is this resolve to be able to learn how to maintain that and let that be a protection to us. So in a way, it's like having an umbrella. You know, it's always raining, but I've learned that I can make this umbrella that protects me from the rain. And if I carry this umbrella around with me, at least I'm not going to get the rain pouring down on my head all the time. So in that degree, thinking, oh, okay, I'm free from the pouring down rain all the time. But if I get rid of the umbrella, I'm going to start getting wet again. So it's right resolve, right protection. Then the next one is to have right speech. And right speech means always speaking the truth as we know it. And that means if we don't know the truth, we say, I don't know. Instead of fabricating some kind of a lie that further separates us from the truth. Because we get to a point where we don't understand, we can't recognize what truth is because we have this web of all these lies and stuff that we've created for ourselves that keep us further and further, keep us like in a net, that keep us all bound up from what truth is. So if we promise to ourselves, that we vow to ourselves to always speak truthfully, now things become simpler. And to be able to say, I don't know. But for human beings, it's very difficult. We all think that, you know, we're so wise that we can know everything. Look, our arrogance and thinking that we can know what all that stuff is out in the sky from our puny little place here on this planet, because we got a couple of telescopes that we spent gazillions of dollars on, that we know what the universe is. It's kind of crazy. You know, that so this is the kind of lies that we tell ourselves. This is the kind of arrogance that we develop that create these emotions, that create these wrong views, that, and we develop these mental misconceptions, you see, that keep us from our true nature of simplicity, of Buddha nature. So always speaking the truth. Then the next one, the fourth one, is right behavior or right conduct. That now we always do good things. That, you know, if we can help somebody, if we're helping ourselves, if we're keeping ourselves clean, we're keeping our houses properly, we have a nice job, we have a nice family and so on. We see somebody who needs some help, we make some time to help them and so on. We have right behavior, we have right conduct, you know, based on this truth, based on this freedom, based on this resolve of the other things that have come before in this Eightfold Path. So that we do this, so we have right conduct, so that we're not doing bad things, we're doing good things, we're doing helpful things for ourselves and for others. So if we look at every opportunity that we have to do something, if we stop and think, is this the right thing to do that is going to keep me from suffering? Uh-oh, I just locked up. Can you guys see me?
Lance, we can hear you, but your screen is frozen. Well, now I can't hear you. If you're talking, we can't hear you. Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
But it's probably the next step is going to have to bail out and come back in.
Okay. Does he need help with that or?
No, he knows what to do.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll just have to decide. There he goes. So,
Man overboard.
yeah, it'll be quick.
I didn't know how to use Zoom before COVID, so my technology skills have gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Silver lining.
Well, not everybody uses, hardwired
Right.
internet. So
Does he?
I know in some of his space he's got hardwire, but some of his spaces are he's using wireless.
Okay.
Well, I had trouble getting in tonight. I don't know why. That's why I was late, but I've done Zoom before, but I don't know.
What did you do right?
Well, I saw for one thing that you'd sent me a second pass. I was trying to get in with the first one. That
Yeah,
was part of the problem.
yeah.
But then I noticed you sent me some other contact information. So I really don't know what I did right.
Well, we're all here, and you will see Lance's face in just a second. So,
Oh, he's still there. Good. Can you hear me now?
we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it just locked up.
Yeah, we were talking about you behind your back. So,
All right, sorry. Any questions or comments? All right. So now we got interrupted, but the benefit you see of having a system of what we take refuge in is I know exactly where we left off, and I know exactly how to get back to where we were. This is the benefit of having a system. So we were talking about right behavior, right conduct. So, and I just said that it's important to be doing good deeds, always doing good deeds. So then we come to the next thing of the Eightfold Path, which is number 5, which is having right livelihood. And right livelihood means that we are in a society, that we have to live in a society. We have to live, in a family or whatever. We can, there are those of us who choose to live by ourselves, but generally speaking, we're social beings who like to live in a society, and we function well in a society because we can't do everything that we would like to do for ourselves and for our families and for our friends all by ourselves. We need to rely on each other. So we have the right livelihood to be able to do that. And that can change. What we do when we're a teenager can be different than what we're doing when we're in our 20s. And during the time of our 20s, we can go through 2 or 3 different job descriptions in the 10 years that we're in our 20s until finally we get into our 30s. And now we start, finding, okay, here's my niche. Here's what I'm really good at. Here's what I'm comfortable with doing. Here's what, people respect me for, and I can respect them, and I can start working. And then by 40s and 50s, I continue, and so on like that. So you find that you have the right livelihood, something that suits you, for your talents and so on, to find what that is. So we have right livelihood. Then the next thing is that to have right effort, that we're always moving in a forward direction, that we're always persevering, we're always moving forward. We're not letting ourselves get lazy. We're not letting ourselves fall backwards. We're not letting ourselves go too far off on tangents and so on, that we have the right effort to be moving in a forward direction. And then the next one is to have the right mindfulness, to develop the skill to be able to withdraw from our daily, myriad obligations and things that we do, to be able to have this time where we can develop a an awareness of what it is that we're doing to analyze and to make little corrections that we may need to do. So it's creating a right mindfulness, and maybe included in that is contemplation, maybe included in that is meditation. So depending on where we are, but to be able to have that circumspection of what it is that we are doing, and be able to have a frequent visit to that circumspection. And then last of the Eightfold Path is to have the right absorption of this, the right concentration of this, all within ourselves, all within our physical body, within our intellectual mind, within our spirituality, that we become the vessel of this balance, of this. We talk about it as being a complete human being. That we're just not a physical being. We're not just an intellectual being. We're not just a spiritual being. We are all these things together in this life, and to be the right balance of all these things. So this is the right absorption or the right concentration, to be aware of that. So this Eightfold Path, the Fourth Noble Truth, is the way that we conduct our lives to be able to have the balance, to be able to stop our suffering, to stop our suffering, to renounce suffering. I'm not going to suffer. I'm going to stay in it. I don't need the mansion with, 20 rooms and a 4-car garage full of different exotic cars. I don't need that. I can have this nice, modest house that has, 5 or 6 rooms and a car and a garage and a nice lawn and whatever else. And I can be happy with that. I don't need to have, all these people all around me all the time that are servants to me and so on. I don't need that. I can have a simpler life. Everybody has their own notion of what that is. I'm not here to be able to say that it's got to be like I do it or like anybody else does it. But you need to find that balance that protects you from your suffering. So this is the Four Noble Truths. So this is the essence. This is the fundamental teaching of the Dharma, and we keep coming back to that. So, in order to help us support this, there's this whole plethora of teachings, of scripture that helps us to keep focused on that. Now, there's 2 ways to be able to recognize this peace of mind, this mind of clarity, this mind of Buddha nature. There's 2 ways, 2 basic ways. One is through realization, that you discover this on your own, that you see this on your own through the circumstances of your life and so on. No one is there to help you do it, or maybe you've had some influence by your family or teachers or something, but basically it's your own realization, however you got there. It's very special to have that. It's not impossible to have that. We can talk about that later on, about individuals who have had that kind of life and so on. But for most of us, it's not really possible because we don't have the right background for it. We're not prepared for that. What we're trying to do is to prepare ourselves for it in the rest of this life or in the next life and so on like that, which, as I say, we'll talk more about. So you can have this realization of what all this truth is, of what all this Dharma is and so on. But for us, it's not, for most of us, we don't have that direct experience. Or maybe we can have a glimpse of it, but we don't have the capacity to be able to really apprehend what that was. Sometimes, people would say, I was out fishing on a lake. I was on a boat and I was just all by myself. And I was just out there all afternoon, and it was just beautiful crystal blue sky. And I got my fishing line in the, and all of a sudden, this feeling just came on to me, or maybe it came out of me, and it was like I just left my body, and I could just see myself sitting on this lake in this boat, and it was like this epiphany, and everything became crystal clear to me, and it went just as fast as it came. So we can have these moments of this kind of clarity, of this direct experience, of this direct realization, but we don't have the tools to be able to interpret what that meant, what that was. We would love to get back there. And it may be that something like that then becomes, a basis of what happens, of how we think about things in the future, how it can be a life-changing moment that we have. So it can be something as looking at the eyes of your baby, your infant who's just recently been born, and the first time you're making eye contact with your baby, and the baby's recognizing you, and that epiphany that you have, stays with you the rest of your life. Direct realization of something that is beyond our ordinary intellectual mind. There was a heart connection. There was a spiritual connection there. So it's very difficult for most of us to be able to apprehend those moments, although we may have had those moments. So for us, we need to have more support. We need to have more intellectualization so that we can approach, what is said to be, this awareness, this free mind. We need to have this. So we get this from our teachers. We get this from our books. We get this from scripture. We get this from our own circumspection within ourselves, our own contemplation, and so on. So we need to investigate. We need to do that. And this is all part of the Dharma. This is all part of feeding the intellect with this process of what it is to become a complete human being. This is all part of the Dharma process. This was the genius of the Buddha, of Buddha Shakyamuni, that he was an ordinary human being who had this epiphany, who had this direct experience, and who said, I can't tell you what the experience is. I can't give it to you, but I can teach you what it was that I went through to have this experience. Then it's up to you to be able to bring that into your life and to implement that and use the things that are going to help you to have your experience with that. So this is all the Dharma teaching. This is all the Dharma. This is what the Buddha taught. So many of these things have been, put into books, been put into teachings and so on. In the beginning, there were oral teachings, and they just repeated these things over and over and over to themselves because, 2,600 years ago, there was only a few people that could read and write. They were illiterate, but they still had very good intellect. They were still smart, and they could memorize, and they would support each other and say, oh, no, he didn't say it this way. He said it this way. And oh, yeah, you're right. And they could memorize these things. And for generations, it continued on like that. But then there was this period after about 200 years after the Buddha passed on that they started writing these things down. So the scriptures came about and so on. And so these scriptures have been passed down through the generations. So these scriptures are broken down into three basic groups. There's the group of what's called the Vinaya teachings. The Vinaya teachings are these discipline teachings about how to stop doing bad things, how to be a good person. And you got to remember, 2,600 years ago, most of the people were either liars or adulterers, if they even bothered getting married, or they were thieves, or all kinds of miscreants, sexual deviants and everything. These were the people, this is what they did. I mean, they had no morality about them. And here was this Buddha who was trying to, that they were coming to be able to learn how to be free of their suffering that they keep compounding on themselves through their misdeeds. So the first thing he said you got to do is stop doing all these things. And to do that, you all got to start wearing the same clothes so that you're not having greediness, you're not having pridefulness that you're better or worse than somebody else. You got to shave your hair so that everybody looks the same. And you got to start getting up early in the morning, and you got to start, doing practices. You got to start, disciplining your life and everything. You all go to bed, you start eating better and everything. So the first thing that he was teaching was discipline. And these are called the Vinaya teachings. It was very important. We can't do these things if we don't have some kind of respect of a discipline. Otherwise, we're just always flying off in all kinds of directions that are taking us down wrong paths. So then the next teaching he gave was a teaching called the Sutra teachings. And these were like the Gospels. These were like, the teachings of the Buddhas, what he would say. And this was the direct speech. And from that came commentaries from those masters who were with the Buddha, who began to, bring this in, and they themselves attained enlightenment. They themselves became free. They themselves recognized themselves as Buddhas, and others recognized themselves as Buddhas. So these teachings became very important. These were called the Sutra teachings. And then the next teachings were called the Abhidharma. And the Abhidharma were these systematic lists of what it is to be the Buddha, what this wisdom is, that was written down and so on, and how to do this. And this is part of, so we have to go through the discipline to get to the sutra part. We have to go through the sutra part to get to the wisdom part, the Abhidharma part. So they're like three, you could say three dice that are stacked on top of each other. One does not lead to the other, but they all are supporting each other. And at whatever position you move them around, you see that they're all supporting each other. They're all part of each other. It becomes a holistic, how do you say, experience, or a holistic teaching, or a holistic concentration of what all this is. So this is all part of the scripture. This is all part of the teachings. So we talk about that the Buddha gave these during his 50 years of teaching. He gave these teachings to, he was teaching compassion. He was teaching emptiness wisdom. He was teaching Buddha nature to these different beings and so on. So at this point, there's no point in dwelling on all these individual things right now, but just know that there are these three levels of teaching that the Buddha was giving simultaneously. And some people, and maybe let's say, for instance, there's 100 people in the audience that the Buddha is talking to. So let's say that out of those 100 people, 98 of those people hear the discipline. There are these people who needed to hear discipline, these wild people who needed to hear discipline. But then there was this one person who understand these other meanings of emptiness and of doing things for the benefit of others and not for oneself. Maybe there was only one person who heard that and what the Buddha was teaching. And maybe there was just one other person who was hearing the wisdom of what that is to become the Buddha, who was recognizing that within themselves and saying, oh yes, I have that within myself. I am the Buddha. I recognize what the Buddha is saying to me. So the point is that the Buddhist Shakyamuni was teaching this all at the same time, but certain people would hear certain things because they were ready to be able to hear it. Their prior experiences had brought them, they were prepared to be able to hear those things and so on. So it is a progressive system. So what we're doing is with Buddhism 101, we're beginning to introduce this system through understanding a chronology, understanding a vocabulary, understanding some philosophic concepts of what this means. And we'll see that they all interconnect with each other more and more and more as we move more and more along the path of understanding this. So these scriptures also have an inner meaning. So this was the outer meaning. So now the inner meaning now is the true source of refuge when we take refuge in the Dharma system. When we take refuge in this Dharma system, when we understand what the Buddha is teaching. So Dharma is a Sanskrit word that means pathway. There's many different pathways. There's pathways to be a carpenter. There's a pathway to be a mother. There's a pathway to be a father. There's a pathway to do any skill set that you can imagine. There's a pathway. And those are all dharmas that would be explained in Sanskrit language. And they're all dharmas with a lowercase d. The uppercase d, dharma, is the teaching, is the pathway of the Buddha. This is how we differentiate in scripture, in writing, what the pathway of the Buddha is. It's a capital dharma, a capital D dharma, to understand that. And what this pathway that leads to is enlightenment, is the realization of Buddha nature, recognizing the Buddha within yourself, our true nature. So in doing this, the things that we learn in the inner exploration of what this pathway is we learn about the truth of karma, what karma means. Karma is another Sanskrit word that means action. For anyone to have an action, there has to be a cause for the action. The action just doesn't pop up out of nowhere. It comes from a thought that says, oh, this is what I need to do based on what I understand, this cause and condition, this condition of where I'm at, what is surrounding me, what I'm thinking of, and so on, all around me. If I do this, I do this action, then there's going to be a result. So there's a cause, there's an action, there's a result. So we say there's karma, cause, and effect. So when we say karma, we're really, if we're a Buddhist like this, we're automatically knowing that it means the cause of the action and it means the result of the action. But karma has become, part of our vernacular in modern day Western society, and we really don't have a true meaning of what karma means. We think it's some kind of thing that comes back to us. If we do bad things, oh, your karma is going to get you. I think is what most people might think about that. But there can be bad karma. There can be good karma. There can be neutral karma. We can have a bad cause that is causing us to want to do something that is bad, but through circumstances, we recognize that and say, I'm going to neutralize that bad cause and do a good deed and then have a good result. But on the other hand, we could have a good cause that we are defiled, and we're going to use that good cause for our own self-aggrandizement. and we're going to use it to manipulate other beings or something. So we're going to manifest a bad a bad action, and then we have a bad result. We have a negative result. So it can move in any direction. We can have something that just neutralizes with no result at all. We can do that too. So understanding this is all part of the Dharma teachings. This is all part of what the Buddha is teaching. We also learn about loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta. Loving kindness is the grace that we have for each other, the loving kindness that we have, the forgiveness that we have for ourselves and that we have for each other. And we can say that is wisdom, that loving kindness, that understanding, that forgiveness is wisdom. And then when we don't have that wisdom, when we make a mistake, that we have compassion for ourselves to say, oh, I did that wrong thing, but I really didn't mean it. I can have compassion for myself. I'm not going to do that again. But for us to have compassion for other beings now becomes more of a work to be able to do that, to be able to have that compassion for others when they are suffering from the things that because their life is the result of their karma, of what they've been doing and so on. So they have to be responsible for that. We have compassion for that. So bodhicitta is loving kindness, compassion, the joy of being able to understand this for ourselves and seeing other people that understand this and recognizing that we're all equal, that all this is the same. And when your mind, when your life, when your body, everything is completely embodied with those four immeasurable qualities, loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, we say that is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta means, bodhi means enlightenment, and citta means the heart mind, the heart mind. So it's the wholly enlightened mind. And all the enlightened beings have bodhicitta. If you look through history, or you look at present time, and you look at the beings that you recognize as really being holy beings, sacred beings who are really pure, that they have loving kindness, they have compassion, they have joy, and they have equanimity that is unstoppable, unceasing. They are the embodiment of that. So this is what we are endeavoring. We have that potential within ourselves. We have that Buddha nature within ourselves. And what we need to, and from time to time, it all comes together. Time to time, it comes out. We do those things. So now it's a matter of recognizing that and being able to cut away all the blockages that are causing us not to have the holy enlightened mind, that are causing us to have negative results and so on. So all this, you see, is all part of the Dharma, all part of the intellectualization of understanding the mechanics of how all this philosophical stuff works and so on. This is a philosophy of purifying the self. It's not to satisfy the Buddha or some supreme being who is out there or wherever you think that supreme being might be. It's all within ourselves so that we become the piece or part or the entirety of that supreme being, however you want to define that. So then the next part of this intellectualization of this Dharma is to understand this, what we call the wisdom of emptiness. And this is a very difficult concept, and we talk a lot about this, and we'll have just one class that we'll talk about, but there are books and books and books that are written about emptiness. And emptiness simply means that we are all compounds of many things. everything are compounds of many things. They all appear to be permanent objects. Our body seems to be permanent of this one body, and we have a name for it and so on. But we know that there's so many bones, there's so many tissues, there's so many fluids, there are so many things that are within us that if we separate them, it's no longer us, but it's something that we all share. So if I look at this table that is in front of me here, and this table appears to be permanent, but this table was once a tree, and this table is made up of fibers, and the fibers was the tree, but that tree was a home to many animals or to many insects and so on. And the tree came from a seed, and the seed was nourished by the soil and the rain and the sunshine and everything. So this table is a composite of many things. And if we can look at all these things, if we can look at all the tissues within my body or your body, and we can look at all these fibers within this table, what do we see? We go down and down and down, and we begin to see atoms. And then we begin to see that there are particles within the atoms. And then we see that there is space between the particles of the atom, and it's all the same. Whether we're a table, whether we're a tree, whether we're a human being, whether we're an insect, whether we're just the air that is invisible to us, is full of all this vibration of gases, of vibrating atoms and so on. So we say that all this stuff is all compounded. So it's empty of its own true nature. None of these things speak to the true nature of what that result is, of what that compounded appearance that we see, whether it's a human being or it's a table or it's the gaseous air, whatever it is. So we say that there is this wisdom of emptiness, of recognizing this true nature of things, this emptiness, and this leads us to impermanence. That we see that everything that is around us is all just temporary. And that as human beings, this is what we think we comprehend, we think we understand, but we don't know the essence of it, you know, and that's what we're trying to get to. And through our Buddha nature, we begin to have experience with that. We begin to have glimpses of what that essence is. So then we come back to the point that there was the scripture, there was all these teachings to understand what this Dharma is, but then there's this direct realization of it, where now all of that stuff is just like blown away, and now you know it yourself. You have the gnosis of this realization. And then that can never be, it's not a vicarious experience. It never can be taken away from you. It becomes part of who you are. You recognize it as that, as the gnosis. So we'll talk more about this. So in this chapter, we talk about Dharma teachings are divided into the different temporary capacities of sentient beings. As I said before, there's different beings will hear the same things, but will hear it at different levels, recognize it in different levels. So, you know, to put a classification on it, we can say that there's inferior, there's intermediate, and there's superior. You know, it's not to be pejorative about them. It's not to look down on people, but, you know, it's a relative way of being, just to be able to analyze things and to be able to intellectualize things and so on. But it gives us the tools to be able to discuss this with ourselves and with other beings. So now the third thing, we talked about the three jewels. So we talked about the mind of the Buddha. We talked about the speech of the Buddha, which is the Dharma, and now a brief thing about the Sangha, the community. So this is the third object of refuge, is the Sangha, the body of the Buddha. Now this isn't literally the physical body of the Buddha, but it's the body of this philosophy of these people, of these human beings that are all, part of this system of being able to understand. So here is a spiritual community of practitioners who have entered the Buddha's teachings and who make single-pointed effort in the practice of virtue. Because all this, you see, comes from virtue. All the emotions, all the confusions, all the mental misconceptions are the results of non-virtue. And then because of the suffering that comes from that, we're blocking ourselves up. But if we have a virtuous life, if we practice the Eightfold Path, which is trying to get us to virtue, then now we have a way into recognizing this true nature, because this Buddha nature, this true nature, is pure virtue, is pure love, is pure compassion, pure joy, pure equanimity. So the Sangha is a spiritual community that does not give priority to worldly concerns of what we call samsara, this phenomenal nature. The Sanskrit word is called samsara, of what this all is. So we're not giving priority to that, but rather to the sublime Dharma, which we've been talking about, and to the goals of liberation and enlightenment. That there is this pathway and that there is this success of freedom, liberation and enlightenment, liberation from the suffering, liberation from the confusion, liberation from dualistic thought, all these different things. So to do this, we need to take refuge in these ideas. We need to take refuge in the system. So this is the meaning of this chapter, the entrance into the Buddha. So please speak up and tell me what you think.
Could you talk a little more about, I think I have a better sense of what enlightenment is not than what it is.
That's right.
And I am also interested, is this a state that once one acquires it, one is there, or is this a state that one comes in and out of and loses ground and reacquires? And how stable is enlightenment?
Well, very good questions. And the general answers is that it can't be explained. It's beyond explanation. It's inexpressible. It is an experience. And so what the Buddha, taught was how he attained enlightenment that was inexpressible. And what we do, we begin to have glimpses of it through the teachings, through the contemplation, through the practices that we need to employ to use these practices to be able to purify ourselves from these blockages, from these emotions, from these mental misconceptions and so on, that we begin to have these glimpses of what that true nature is, of what that enlightenment is. The more that we do that, those glimpses grow into visions. And then those visions grow into a stability, and that we are bringing that into our lives. So that if we say figuratively that when we do our practices, when we do these meditations, that we're sitting on a cushion. And during this time, we've controlled all the things around us, and we're free to be able to have these experiences while we're on this cushion. But as soon as we get up off the cushion, now we go out and the phone starts ringing and somebody starts talking to us and we got to get in the car and we got to go someplace. And then all that freedom, all that peace of mind that we attained on the cushion gets blown away. But what we're trying to do, you see, is through the repeated practices of being on the cushion, that when we get up off the cushion, we become stable and we take that with us. And our life is transformed. We become stable in the meditation. That no matter if we are getting in the car, no matter if the phone is ringing, no matter if somebody is talking to us, we still are in that mind of enlightenment, that mind of bodhicitta. Somebody else?
But the thing of the matter is that it's that you have to really desire, and you have to really work at it, and not just come in once a week and, you know, like go to church and then the rest of the week, you know, be a hellraiser. This is something that you have to, the more you work at it, the easier it becomes to be truthful, to be courageous, to be open to what all's out there. And for me, where I am right now, which is, you know, probably the bottom of the step ladder, it's been a continual, each day a little bit better than the last day. And if you don't believe me, ask my wife. But
I think we're all in that same boat.
for sure. But you know, it's something that we develop into, and once that you attain something and you really have it within you, it doesn't go away. It's something, I know this, and I know this because I've gone through this situation. I know this is what happens. I know this. As opposed to, I read this in the book and somebody told me this is what it is. You have to go through all of these different experiences, and what I'm feeling is that it's different for each person, although it's the same, because each of us has this condition that we're working through our mind and getting control of that, of the mind and of yourself. Like it used to be, I could throw a hammer clear across the room, and now I use that for hammer and nails, you know.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Somebody else want to make a comment?
I think for some of us, Lance, it's difficult to navigate so that sort of liminal space that we're called to acknowledge, that runs between our human existence and having that sort of awareness of our true nature just around the corner. I think I think for some of us, it's hard to believe that if something is something like enlightenment that we talk about, that word so often, that if it seems to be completely incomprehensible, inconceivable, then at the same time it exists, a millisecond away from our awareness. It's hard to get your arms around that. Do you have any advice for some of us that are trying to look around the corner?
Well, sure. I think reading, I think, reading the biographies of some of these great masters like Milarepa and Marpa and the other, 8 great masters of Kagyu, reading about the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama has so many books, reading about him and, his stories, and reading about these and understanding, and they talk in terms that are human terms, and their dilemmas are the same as our dilemmas. What they've had to deal with are the same as what we have to deal with. Maybe it's in a different scale, but when you get down to it, it's just, one human being trying to, get in touch with what's around them and so on, and trying to understand what's inside of them. So they have very, very articulate ways of being able to talk about that. So that's what I recommend is reading those books, hearing those books, and then also joining these teachings. Right now we're very fortunate because in the regard of, because of Zoom, now so many teachings that you had to go to the particular Dharma centers to be able to hear those teachings. Now they're all online. So Michael has been terrific. He's been taking many of these teachings from our different teachers and putting them on YouTube. So you can make a commitment to yourself, to say, okay, I'm going to go through this study of what this Lama is teaching. And yes, it's going to take me, 4 weeks or 8 weeks or something like that to do that. But at the end of that, you are going to have, a really good teaching, the same as if you were in the shrine room that you don't have the ability to do, but we can do it through the computer system. So those are the 2 things that I would say: reading books and taking advantage of what's on YouTube and these great teachings if you can't get into a Lama teaching, and partaking of what we're doing here. Like I said, it's just establishing a ground floor of vocabulary so you can understand some of the basic concepts. But it's very easy to blast by what we're talking about, and you can get into these other teachings, these higher teachings.
So we can learn from the stories of these amazing folks and get to realize, even through Zoom, that there are enlightened ones that walk amongst us. Is that true?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you are tomorrow's enlightened one. All of us. We are, enlightenment just doesn't come like that. Enlightenment is a process, is a development. You may not recognize the process, but it is a process. And so what you're doing now is you're part of that process. So whether what degree of the result you see in this lifetime is relative, but you may not see full enlightenment, but you'll be a lot closer to it. And as we would say in our tradition, that in the next lifetime, you'll be a lot closer to it. And you begin where you left off, so to speak. So it's a continuum.
What
Yeah.
story? I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I've had a turn. You go.
I've had one too. here's something that you can try. You know, we all have silent retreats.
Silent retreats, did you say?
Silent retreats.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. This next week, don't say anything that isn't necessary to say. Try that practice for a week.
Yeah.
Don't say anything that isn't necessary to say.
that's a good practice. Shut thy mouth.
All right, you got me. Now I have to say something.
Okay.
Because I found myself thinking about that just like literally I was having that thought this week. One of the things that I've noticed over the last couple of months is things that so I have conflict with my boss and he would do something and I would immediately have a very negative reaction. I would be very upset about it. And I'm finding that now there's this little gap in the middle where I can say, oh man, he did that thing. And my automatic response is going to be to be mad about it. And maybe I still do the thing that I would have done before, but it like my heart's not in the being mad. Like there's that little gap that let me go, all right, now I have to stamp my feet a little bit. And so I had an experience this week where I was having a conversation with someone who I find kind of talks over me and doesn't seem to be very interested in what I have to say. And I found myself thinking, why do I talk? Why do I ever talk? Why does anybody ever speak? And I've been walking around with that thought in my head. I've been sitting in here with that thought in my head. And William, here you are with it. So well played, sir.
Yeah, we
And,
give ourselves away all the time.
Everybody knows who Viktor Frankl was, right? Yeah, one of his most famous quotes is between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response.
Mhm.
So yeah, encountering these liminal spaces, encountering these places where there are gaps between the boundaries, it's a real job, but I think it's absolutely necessary, and you get to be more confident walking through life, knowing that you don't have to be in a big hurry to judge what happened or to predict what's happening next.
Very good. Yes. Ed, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I'm well below 101 here. I'm 01. But what is in Buddhism, what is the orientation or compatibility or role in Buddhism of the existence of a God or supreme being?
Well, we don't know.
Mhm.
Remember, I said in the Eight Noble Path or the Eightfold Path that always speak the truth.
Mhm.
So, the truth is, the Buddha said, and everybody can speak for themselves, but there can be a perception of something, but I don't know for sure that there is a supreme being, but in our way of thinking, it really doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's how we are in this life that matters. Regardless of how we got here or why we got here or why we're here, it's what we're doing with it now that is what matters. And that we're not creating any more suffering for ourselves or for others. That's what's important, to be virtuous, to be holy, and to be sacred. That's what's important. So whether there's somebody pulling levers or watching over us or who created all this or something, we don't know. But I'm willing to say that maybe there is, but it doesn't matter to me.
But can a person be a Buddhist and a Christian, say, at the same time?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, one does not, because this is the philosophy. Buddhism is the philosophy of liberating the self. And religion is a man's relationship to a supreme being. So if you want to subscribe to a supreme being, that's fine, but that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with actually understanding yourself. Brings a long way, brings you closer to understanding what that supreme being is.
Mhm.
And seeing if there's a supreme, that we're all part of that same thing.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
I
Rebecca?
saw a quote from the Dalai Lama over the weekend that I liked that said, the purpose of Buddhism isn't to make everybody Buddhist. It's for you to take this back to your life and make your life more meaningful, more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. You take the meditation with you when you get up off the cushion and integrate it into your life. Well, it's after 9 o'clock. I don't want to keep everybody. If you have something you want to say, or don't hesitate to speak up now. But I think we should do our dedication prayers, and if anybody has anything to add afterwards, we can discuss that. So, Ed, if you're interested in staying with us, we do have a prayer book, and I can mail it to you if you send me your mailing address. And we're going through this book here. And I'm sending everybody the PDF of each chapter so you can read it ahead of time. And I can send you this PDF if you like. I got your email address, so if you're interested, I can do that for you if you want to continue with us. So this is the first of 8 weeks of a cycle. But what we're going to do is we're going to finish this book, however long it takes. So we're doing it in 8-week chunks. So the idea is to make a commitment, to yourself, that you're going to, spend some time doing this. If you have to drift in and out, that's up to you. But, to take refuge in this and to see the benefit.
I would like to do that.
All right, great. Send me your address and I'll send you this book. And the prayers are a huge part of what we do, because the prayers are not to something out there. It's to ourselves as a remembrance of what our intentions are, why we are doing this. So we're doing this for the benefit of the enlightenment of other beings, that we're giving whatever degree of enlightenment that we attain through our studies and conversations, we're giving that to other beings. We're not keeping it for ourselves. We're not being selfish with our enlightenment.
Well, that's been my experience with Michael Galvin, and that's why I'm here.
Okay, good. All right, well then, if you don't mind, we're going to do our dedication prayers. So we'll read page 20, 21, and 22. So I will lead this, and if you don't have the book, just please listen. And so this is called the Dekorma prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Sri Khompa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. This is the dedication prayer by the founder of our lineage, Jigmen Sumgun, 800 years ago, this next prayer. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shavaka or Pratyeka Buddha. And we will talk about the meaning of these words in the future. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings with my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones. Thank you all very much.